There is a specific kind of silence that fills a car when you realize your entire life is a lie. It isn't loud. It isn't dramatic. It is just heavy. It presses against your ears and makes the air feel too thick to breathe. I was sitting in the passenger seat of our SUV. My husband, Mark, had just run into the gas station to grab a coffee. The engine was off, but the radio was still playing quietly. It was raining outside, just a light drizzle that tapped against the roof like nervous fingers. I was looking for a napkin. I had spilled a drop of water on my jeans, and I hate being messy. I popped open the glove compartment. It was usually full of Mark's things, tire pressure gauges, old receipts, a stack of napkins from the drive-thru. I reached in, feeling around the back for a napkin. My fingers brushed against something hard and cold. It wasn't a tire gauge. It felt like plastic. I pulled it out. It was a phone. A cheap, black smartphone. Not Mark's sleek iPhone, and definitely not mine. I stared at it. For a second, my brain tried to make excuses. Maybe he found it. Maybe he was holding it for a friend. But deep down, your gut always knows before your brain catches up. My first thought was a woman. That's always the first thought, isn't it? I thought I was holding the evidence of an affair. I felt that sick drop in my stomach, the one that feels like you missed a step on the stairs. My hand started to tremble, just as I was about to put it back. Terrified that Mark would walk out of the store and see me, the screen lit up. It buzzed in my hand. A notification. I expected to see a name. Jessica, Sarah, baby. But there was no name. The notification was from a banking app. And it wasn't just any bank. It was my bank. The bank where I had kept my inheritance from my grandmother. The account that was supposed to be our safety net. The message on the screen read, Alert! Account balance below threshold. Current balance, $12.43. I stopped breathing. That account should have had $40,000 in it. I swiped the screen. There was no passcode. The phone opened immediately to the banking app. It was logged in. My username. My account number. I stared at the number on the screen. $12.43. The world tilted. I looked out the window. I saw Mark coming out of the gas station. He was smiling. He was holding 2 coffees, walking with that easy, confident stride I had loved for 15 years. He looked so normal. He looked like the man who checked the locks at night. The man who promised to take care of me. I quickly shoved the phone back into the hidden spot in the glove box. I slammed it shut just as he opened the driver's side door. Got you a vanilla latte, he said, handing me the cup. His voice was warm. Everything okay, babe? You look a little pale. I looked at him, really looked at him. And for the first time in our marriage, I didn't see my husband. I saw a stranger who had just bought me a $4 coffee with the last of my life savings. I'm fine, I said. My voice sounded hollow, like it was coming from someone else. Just a headache. To understand why I didn't scream at him right there in the car, you have to understand who Mark and I were, or who I thought we were. We were the solid couple. We had been married for 12 years. We weren't the type for drama. We didn't have screaming matches. We paid our bills on time. We had a plan. Mark was an accountant. That was the irony that would later keep me awake at night. He was good with numbers. He was precise, organized, and responsible. Because of his job, it made sense for him to handle our household finances. I worked as a graphic designer, and while I made good money, I hated spreadsheets. I hated looking at interest rates and tax documents. So, early in our marriage, we made a deal. I handled the house, the scheduling, the social calendar, and the day-to-day purchases. Mark handled the investments, the savings, and the long-term planning. It worked. Or so I thought. Every month, he would give me a summary. We're doing great, Lisa, he would say, tapping his laptop screen. The retirement fund is up 6%. The house fund is growing. He made me feel safe. That was his greatest talent. He made me feel like there was a wall around us, protecting us from the chaos of the world. We were saving for a bigger house. We wanted a place with a backyard for a dog, maybe a guest room for when my parents visited. That $40,000, the money my grandmother had left me, was the down payment. I had transferred it to a separate high-yield savings account 2 years ago. Mark had told me, "Don't touch it, Lisa. Let it grow. I'll monitor the rates." I trusted him. Why wouldn't I? He was my husband. He was the man who held my hand when my mother got sick. He was the man who remembered our anniversary every single year. Sitting in that car, holding the warm paper cup, I watched him drive. He was humming along to the radio. He looked so relaxed. How could a man who had just stolen everything from his wife look so relaxed? My mind was racing. $12. Where did it go? Was it drugs? Was it a woman after all? And he was just paying for her lifestyle? I looked at his hands on the steering wheel. No wedding ring. He took it off when he played golf, he said. But he hadn't played golf in months. "You're really quiet," Mark said, glancing over at me. "Sure you're okay?" I took a sip of the coffee. It tasted like ash. "I'm just thinking about the house," I lied. "Do you think we'll be ready to buy this spring?" I watched his face closely. I saw a tiny twitch in his jaw, just for a microsecond. Then, the smooth, reassuring mask was back in place. "Absolutely," he said, smiling. "The market is shifting. We're in a great position, Lisa. Just you wait." He squeezed my knee affectionately. I felt like vomiting. He was lying to my face. He wasn't just lying, he was performing. He was playing the role of the provider while he drained me dry that I knew I couldn't confront him yet. If I screamed now, he would have an explanation. Mark could talk his way out of anything. He would say it was a glitch, a transfer error, or that he moved the money to a better account. He would use big financial words to make me feel stupid and small. He would gaslight me until I apologized for doubting him. I know. I needed more than a glimpse of a screen. I needed proof. I needed to know where the money went. And most importantly, I needed to know if there was anything left to save. When we got home, Mark went straight to the garage to clean his tools. That was his routine lately. He spent a lot of time in the garage. I went into the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I needed that phone. I waited until midnight. Mark was asleep. He was a heavy sleeper, snoring softly beside me. I slipped out of bed, my bare feet silent on the hardwood floor. I grabbed his car keys from the hook by the door, and my hands were shaking so badly I dropped the keys twice before I got to the garage. I opened the car door slowly, praying the interior light wouldn't wake him up inside the house. I opened the glove box. The phone was still there. I took it and ran back into the bathroom, locking the door behind me. I sat on the cold tile floor and turned it on. I wasn't ready for what I was about to find. I thought I was looking for a girlfriend. I thought I was looking for jewelry receipts or hotel bookings. But what I found was so much worse than an affair. An affair breaks your heart. What Mark was doing was destroying our survival. I opened the browser history. It was a long list of sites. But they weren't dating sites. BetMGM, DraftKings, PokerStars, high-interest payday loans, how to hide debt from spouse. I felt the room spin. I clicked on the banking app again. I scrolled through the transaction history. It wasn't just one withdrawal. It was hundreds. $500 to DraftKings, $1,000 to FanDuel, $2,000 cash withdrawal. And then I saw the deposits. Loan disbursement, $5,000 loan disbursement, $10,000. He wasn't just spending our savings. He was taking out loans. I dug deeper. I found a folder in his email app labeled trash. I opened it. There were notifications from credit card companies I had never heard of. Cards in my name. "Dear Lisa, your application for the Platinum Visa has been approved." I covered my mouth to stop a sob from escaping. He had stolen my identity. He had opened credit cards in my name, maxed them out, and was now using my grandmother's inheritance to pay the minimum balances on gambling debts. I sat on that bathroom floor for an hour, scrolling through the destruction of my life. We weren't just broke. We were drowning, and the man sleeping in the next room, the man I shared a bed with, was the one holding my head under the water. I knew I had to put the phone back. If Mark woke up and found it missing from the car, he would know. He would panic. And a panicked man is a dangerous man. That I pulled my own phone out of my pajama pocket. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely focus the camera. I took pictures of everything. The banking app balance, the transaction history, the emails confirming the credit card approvals, the login for the gambling site. That I needed proof. I knew deep down that if I tried to explain this to anyone later without evidence, Mark would spin it. He was charming. He was the responsible one. He would tell everyone I was crazy or hormonal or confused. I slipped out of the bathroom and crept back through the dark house. The garage was freezing. I opened the car door, wincing as the hinge gave a tiny squeak. I shoved the black phone back behind the stack of napkins in the glove box. When I climbed back into bed, Mark shifted. He threw an arm over my waist. "Love you," he mumbled in his sleep. His arm felt heavy. It felt like a chain. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rhythm of his breathing. I tried to reconcile the man sleeping next to me with the man who had gambled away my grandmother's legacy. That I didn't sleep at all. The next morning was a test of every acting skill I didn't know I possessed. I was in the kitchen making coffee when Mark walked in. He looked fresh, rested. He was wearing his blue button-down shirt, the one I had ironed for him. "Morning, beautiful," he said, kissing me on the cheek. That I flinched. I couldn't help it. He pulled back, looking concerned. "Whoa, you okay? You're jumpy." I turned away, pouring the coffee into a mug so he wouldn't see my eyes. "I just didn't sleep well. Bad dreams." "I told you not to watch those crime shows before bed," he chuckled. He walked over to the fridge and opened it. "Hey, did you transfer the money for the car insurance? It's due on the 15th. My blood ran cold. "The car insurance. I thought you handled that," I said, keeping my voice steady. "From the joint account." Right, he said quickly, grabbing the milk. "I just meant, did you move your portion over? The transfer didn't show up yesterday." He was asking me for money. He had stolen $40,000 from me, and he was standing in our kitchen asking for $200 for car insurance because he had likely emptied the joint account too. "I'll do it today," I said. "Thanks, babe. You're the best." He took a sip of his coffee and looked at his watch. "I've got a long day. Client meetings until 6. Don't wait up for dinner." Client meetings. Or was he going to a casino? Or just sitting in his car in a parking lot, betting on horse races in Dubai on that secret phone? As soon as his car backed out of the driveway, the paralysis broke. I didn't go to work. I called in sick. I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. It was time to see the full extent of the damage. I went to a credit reporting site. I had to reset my password because, surprise, surprise, my usual password didn't work. Mark must have changed it to stop me from seeing the alerts. When I finally got in, I gasped. A physical sound of pain left my throat. My credit score, which had been a perfect 800 when we married, was 540. Red flags were everywhere. Delinquent payment, Chase Sapphire, past due for $1,000. Personal loan, SoFi. Balance, $25,000. Personal loan, Upstart. Balance, $15,000. I did the math on a notepad. My hand was cramping. I was pressing so hard with the pen. Between the stolen savings and the debt in my name, we were in the hole for nearly $100,000. I felt like the floor was dissolving. How did he do this? How did I not know? Then I remembered the mail. Mark always got the mail. "I'll grab it on my way in. Don't worry about it," he'd say. He was being helpful. He wasn't being helpful. He was intercepted the warnings. I needed to go to the bank, the physical bank. I needed to look someone in the eye and ask how this happened. I drove to the branch of the bank where I held my personal savings, the inheritance account. I walked into the lobby. It was quiet. The air conditioning was humming. I sat down across from a banker named David. He looked young, maybe 25. I need to see my account history, I said, and I need to see the withdrawal slips. David typed on his keyboard. He frowned. Mrs. Reynolds, it looks like most of the transfers were done digitally through the mobile app, but there were 2 in-person cash withdrawals last month. Show me, I said. He turned the screen. Who authorized these? I asked. Well, it was a joint request, David said. You're both on the file now. I never added him to this account, I whispered. This was my account. Sole ownership. David looked uncomfortable. According to our records, you came in 3 months ago and signed the paperwork to add Mark Reynolds as a joint owner. I wasn't here 3 months ago, I said, my voice rising. I was in Chicago for work. David pulled a file from a drawer. He slid a piece of paper across the desk. Here is the signature card. I looked at the signature. Lisa Reynolds. It looked like my signature, but the loop on the L was wrong, and the S was too sharp. It was a forgery. A good one, but a forgery. That's not me, I said. Tears pricked my eyes. He forged my signature. David went quiet. He pulled the paper back. Ma'am, that is a very serious accusation. If you're claiming fraud... I'm not just claiming it, I said, leaning forward. My husband stole my identity. He stole my money, and I need you to freeze everything. Right now. David looked at me with a mix of pity and alarm. I can freeze the account, but if his name is on it, freeze it, I commanded. And tell me exactly where the money went. I spent the next 2 hours in that office. We traced the money. It was a sickness. He would drain $1,000, lose it, take out a loan to cover it, lose that, and then steal from me to pay the interest. It was a cycle of destruction that had been going on for 2 years. 2 years. For 2 years, he had been coming home, eating the dinner I cooked, asking me how my day was, and sleeping in my bed, all while systematically dismantling our future. I walked out of the bank into the bright afternoon sunlight. I felt exposed. I felt stupid. How does a smart woman let this happen? But then I remembered the second phone. I remembered the text messages I had seen on it in the early hours of the morning. He wasn't just gambling. He was desperate. And desperation makes people careless. I got back in my car, but I didn't go home. I had one more stop. I drove to Mark's office building. I parked across the street where I could see his car in the lot. I needed to see what he did on his lunch break. At 12:30, Mark came out. He wasn't with clients. He was alone. He walked to his car. He sat in the driver's seat. I watched through my binoculars, the ones we used for bird watching on our camping trips. He reached into the glove box. He pulled out the black phone. His posture changed. He slumped over the steering wheel. He was tapping furiously on the screen. Then he hit the steering wheel with his fist. Once. Twice. He looked like he was screaming, but I couldn't hear him through the glass. He looked trapped. Good, I thought. I started the engine of my car. I wasn't going to confront him in the parking lot. That was too easy. That gave him a chance to make a scene, to play the victim. No, I was going to wait until he was most vulnerable. I was going to wait until he thought he had gotten away with it. I drove home and started packing a bag. Not for me. For him. I stood in the center of our bedroom, staring at the open suitcase on the bed. I had thrown in his shirts, his socks, that expensive watch I bought him for his 40th birthday. I wanted to throw them all out on the front lawn. I wanted to set them on fire. But then my hand froze over a pair of jeans. If I kicked him out now, what would happen? He would leave. He would disappear into the night, probably to a cheap motel or a friend's couch. and I would be left standing in this house with $100,000 of debt anchored to my name. If I confronted him here in the privacy of our home, he would deny it. He would cry. He would say he had a system to win it back. He would manipulate me, and without a witness, without a legal record, it would just be a domestic dispute. I couldn't just kick him out. I had to trap him. Slowly, methodically, I took the clothes out of the suitcase and put them back in the drawers. I smoothed out the wrinkles in his shirts. I closed the closet door. I wasn't going to pack a bag for him. I was going to make sure he packed his own coffin. I spent the next hour securing my perimeter. I found my grandmother's vintage diamond earrings, the only things of real value I had left, and taped them inside a vent in the guest room. I took my passport and birth certificate and hid them in the bottom of a box of cereal in the pantry. It sounds crazy, I know, but when you realize you are living with a thief, you start to think like a fugitive. At 6 p.m., the garage door opened. The rumble of the engine vibrated through the floorboards. My heart didn't race this time. It went cold. I met him in the hallway. I forced a smile onto my face. It felt tight, like a mask that didn't quite fit. Hey, I said. Mark was holding a bouquet of flowers. Lilies. My favorite. I felt bad about rushing out this morning, he said, handing them to me. He looked tired. His eyes were red-rimmed. I wanted to bring you these, to say I love you. I took the flowers. The smell was overwhelming, sickeningly sweet. Thank you, I said. They're beautiful. I walked to the kitchen to find a vase. He followed me, loosening his tie. So, he started leaning against the counter. I was looking at some numbers today. For the house. Here it comes, I thought. The next move. Oh! I asked, filling the vase with water. What kind of numbers? Well, rates are shifting, he said, using that confident accountant voice again. And I was thinking we have a lot of equity sitting in this house doing nothing. If we did a cash out refinance, we could pull out maybe $50,000. We could invest it or finally redo the kitchen like you wanted. I gripped the edge of the sink. He wasn't satisfied with the savings. He wasn't satisfied with the credit cards. Now he wanted to mortgage our shelter. He wanted to gamble away the roof over our heads. I turned to face him. I had to be perfect. One slip, one tear, and he would know. That sounds interesting, I said. Redoing the kitchen would be nice. His eyes lit up. He thought he had me. He thought I was still the stupid, trusting wife who hated numbers. Right, he said, stepping closer. I can draw up the paperwork tonight. I have a buddy who can fast-track the appraisal. We just need to sign a few forms. Tonight? I asked. Ideally, the rates change fast. He was desperate. The bookie or the bank or whoever was chasing him, they were close. He needed cash immediately. I dried my hands on a towel. I don't know, Mark. You know how I get with legal documents. I like to have someone explain them to me. I can explain them to you, he laughed nervously. I'm an accountant, remember? I know, I said softly, but I'd feel better if we did it at the bank. Officially. Maybe we can go tomorrow morning. He hesitated. I saw the panic flicker in his eyes. He didn't want a third party. He wanted me to sign on the kitchen table so he could forge the witness lines later. Babe, it's just a standard refi, he said, his voice tightening. The bank will take hours. Please. I put a hand on his arm. For my peace of mind, if we go to the bank tomorrow, I'll sign whatever you want. I watched him weigh the options. He needed the money. If going to the bank was the only way to get my signature, he had to take the risk. Okay, he sighed. Okay, fine. We'll go to the branch on Main Street tomorrow morning. No, I said. Let's go to the one on Oak Street. That's where the mortgage is held, right? That was also where David, the banker who knew about the fraud, worked. Sure, Mark said. Oak Street, tomorrow at 9 a.m. He kissed my forehead. You're making a good decision, Lisa. This is going to be great for us. We ate dinner in silence. Or rather, Mark talked and I listened. He talked about a new client. He talked about the weather. He talked about the future. Every word was a lie. I watched him eat. I watched the way he cut his steak. I used to love his hands. Strong, capable hands. Now I saw them for what they were. The hands of a magician, distracting me with one hand while the other picked my pocket. That night, lying in bed, the tension was unbearable. Mark fell asleep quickly. The exhaustion of his double life must have been draining. Once his breathing leveled out, I sat up. I needed to know one last thing. I needed to know who he owed. I crept out of bed and went to the garage again. I retrieved the second phone from the glove box. I opened his text messages. There was a new thread at the top from a number with no name. Unknown. You have 24 hours, Mark. Don't make us come to the house. Mark, I'm getting it. The house refinance is happening tomorrow. I'll have $50K for you by noon. Unknown noon. Not 12:01. Noon. I stared at the screen. He wasn't just gambling online. He was involved with loan sharks. People who threatened to come to the house. A cold shiver went down my spine. I wasn't just losing my money. I was in danger. If that refinance didn't go through tomorrow, which I was going to make sure it didn't, those people might come here. I had to end this. Tomorrow. I took a screenshot of the threat and forwarded it to my own secure email. Then I put the phone back. When I walked back into the bedroom, Mark rolled over. Lisa, he mumbled, his voice thick with sleep. Where were you? I froze in the doorway. Just getting water, I whispered. Come to bed, he said. Big day tomorrow. I climbed into bed. I lay as close to the edge as possible, terrified that if our skin touched, I would scream. Big day, I echoed in the dark. He had no idea. The next morning, the sun was shining. It was a beautiful, crisp autumn day. The kind of day where you should be going for a hike or drinking cider. Instead, I was dressing for a funeral. The funeral of my marriage. I put on my sharpest blazer. I put on my heels. I put on waterproof mascara. You look nice, Mark said as we walked to the car. He was jittery. He kept tapping his leg. You ready to get this done? I'm ready, I said. He drove. I sat in the passenger seat, my purse clutched in my lap. Inside my purse was my phone, with all the evidence queued up. As we pulled into the bank parking lot, Mark turned to me. Hey, he said, when we go in there, just let me do the talking, okay? It speeds things up. You just need to sign where they put the X. Okay, Mark, I said. We walked through the glass doors. The air was cool and smelled of money and coffee. Mark walked confidently toward a desk in the corner. Hi, we're here to see a loan officer about a refinance. Actually, I cut in, my voice loud and clear in the quiet lobby. We're here to see David. Mark froze. He looked at me, confused. Who? David, I said, pointing. David was standing at his cubicle. He saw me. He saw Mark. His face went pale, then stern. He stood up. Mark looked at David, then back at me. He saw the look in my eyes. It wasn't the look of a confused wife anymore. It was the look of a prosecutor. Lisa, Mark whispered, his smile faltering. What are you doing? I'm managing our finances, Mark, I said. Finally, Mark's hand tightened on my elbow. It wasn't a loving touch anymore. It was a vice grip. Lisa, he hissed, leaning close to my ear so the other customers couldn't hear. We don't know a David. Stop playing games. We have an appointment with the loan officer. I canceled it, I said, pulling my arm away from him. I didn't whisper. I spoke at a normal volume. I canceled the refinance application this morning, Mark. For a second, he looked like I had slapped him. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The color drained from his face. So fast, he looked gray. David waved us over. We sat down at his desk. I sat straight, my hands folded on my lap. Mark slumped into the chair next to me, his eyes darting around the room as if looking for an exit. Mrs. Reynolds, David said, nodding to me. Then he looked at Mark. His expression was cold. Mr. Reynolds. Look, Mark stammered, his charm evaporating. I don't know what my wife has told you, but she's been under a lot of stress lately. She's not thinking clearly. We just need to sign the papers for the equity line. There are no papers, Mark, I said. Mark turned on me, his eyes wide and frantic. Lisa, stop it. You don't know what you're doing. We need this money. It's for us, for the kitchen, for the investment. It's for the loan sharks, I said. The silence that followed was heavy. It sucked the air out of the little cubicle. Mark went perfectly still. The ticking of the clock on the wall seemed to get louder. Tick, tick, tick. I found the phone, Mark, I continued, my voice trembling just slightly. I found the one in the glove box. I know about the $40,000 from my grandmother. I know about the credit cards you opened in my name. And I know you owe someone 50 grand by noon today. I checked my watch. It's 9:15. You're running out of time. Mark looked at me, and the mask finally fell off completely. The loving husband, the responsible accountant, the partner, he vanished. In his place was a terrified, cornered animal. You went through my things, he whispered, his voice full of venom. You invaded my privacy. You stole my life. I snapped, my voice rising. You stole my identity. You forged my signature. I looked at David. Show him. David slid the paper across the desk again. The signature card for the withdrawal of my inheritance. That is a felony, Mr. Reynolds, David said quietly. Bank fraud, identity theft, forgery. Mark didn't look at the paper. He looked at me, and then he did something that broke my heart one last time. He didn't apologize. He didn't beg for forgiveness. He tried to negotiate. Lisa, listen to me, he said, his voice dropping to a desperate plead. If we don't pay these guys, they're going to come to the house. They aren't banks. They're dangerous. Just sign the refinance. Please. Once I pay them off, I swear I'll fix everything. I'll get a second job. I'll pay it all back. Just save me this one time. He reached for my hand. His palm was sweaty. We're a team, right? He said. In sickness and in health? This is a sickness, Lisa. I'm sick. Help me. I looked at his hand, the hand I had held at our wedding, the hand I thought would hold our children one day. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, but my resolve was made of steel. I am helping you, I said. I'm stopping you. I pulled my hand away. David, I said, turning to the banker, I want to file a formal affidavit of fraud for the unauthorized transactions. I am freezing my credit today, and I am removing my name from any joint assets that haven't been drained yet. You can't do that, Mark shouted. A security guard by the door took a step toward us. Mark lowered his voice, trembling. Lisa, if you freeze the accounts, I can't pay them. They'll kill me. Then call police, I said calmly. That's what honest people do when they are in trouble. I stood up. My legs felt weak, but I locked my knees. I packed a bag for you, I said, looking down at him. It's in the trunk of the car. I'm taking the car because it's in my name. I'm going to my sister's house. You are not welcome there. You're leaving me here? He asked, incredulous. With nothing. You left me with nothing first, Mark. You left me with negative $100,000. I turned to walk away. Lisa, he yelled. Lisa, come back here. I kept walking. I heard the scrape of his chair as he stood up to follow me. But then I heard David's voice, sharp and authoritative. Mr. Reynolds, sit down. We need to discuss the federal crime you committed on bank property. Security has already called the authorities. I didn't look back. I walked out of the glass doors into the sunshine. I got into my car, and locked the doors immediately. I saw Mark through the window of the bank. He was arguing with the security guard. He looked small. He looked pathetic. I put the car in reverse. I drove out of the parking lot. I drove 2 blocks before I had to pull over. I parked in a grocery store lot, put my head on the steering wheel and screamed. I screamed until my throat burned. I screamed for the marriage that was dead. I screamed for the money that was gone. I screamed for the stupidity of trusting him. Then I wiped my face. I checked my phone. It was 9:45 a.m. I had blocked Mark's number, but notifications were still coming through on the banking app. Alert, account frozen. Alert, access denied. I took a deep breath. The hardest part was over. I had cut the limb to save the body. But the war wasn't over. I still had the debt. I still had the loan sharks who knew where I lived. And I still had a husband who, now that he had nothing to lose, might become something far worse than a thief. I drove to the police station. I wasn't going to wait for them to come to me. I was going to report the identity theft, and I was going to show them the threat on the phone. I walked up to the front desk. The officer looked up. "Can I help you, ma'am?" "Yes," I said. "My husband has been gambling with money he stole from me, and now the people he owes are threatening our home." The officer pulled out a form. "Name?" "Lisa Reynolds," I said. Then I corrected myself. "Lisa, just Lisa." I spent the next 3 hours giving a statement. By the time I walked out, it was past noon. The deadline. I checked my phone. No messages. I drove to my sister's house. She lived 40 minutes away. I had called her on the way. She was waiting in the driveway when I pulled up. She didn't say a word. She just opened my car door and hugged me. She held me while I shook. "He's gone," I sobbed into her shoulder. "The man I married is gone." "He was never there, honey," she whispered. "He was never there." We went inside. I sat on her couch, drinking tea, feeling numb. Then my phone rang. It wasn't Mark. It was a number I didn't recognize. I stared at it. Was it the loan sharks? Was it the bank? I answered it. "Hello." "Mrs. Reynolds." A deep voice. "This is Officer Miller from the precinct. You were just here." "Yes." My heart hammered. "We sent a patrol car to your residence to do a welfare check. Based on the threats you showed us," he said. "We found your husband." The world stopped. "Is he?" I couldn't say it. "He's alive," the officer said. "But the house." "Mrs. Reynolds, you need to come down here. There's been an incident." My sister, Sarah, drove. I couldn't trust my hands on the wheel. My whole body was vibrating, a low-frequency tremor that started in my bones and rattled my teeth. We didn't speak. The silence in the car was thick, filled only by the hum of the tires on the asphalt. I kept checking my phone, expecting a text, a threat, something. But the screen remained black. When we turned onto my street, the quiet, tree-lined cul-de-sac where we had hosted barbecues and handed out Halloween candy, the first thing I saw was the blue light. It wasn't just one police car. There were 3, and an ambulance. The rotating lights swept across the lawns of my neighbors, painting their white picket fences in spasms of blue and red. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered. My neighbors were outside. Mrs. Higgins, who always waved when I walked to the mailbox, was standing in her bathrobe with her hand over her mouth. The Johnsons were on their porch, arms crossed, watching the spectacle. This was the public shame I had feared. The veil of our perfect life wasn't just lifted, it was torn to shreds. Sarah stopped the car behind a cruiser. I opened the door before the engine cut out. "Ma'am, stay back!" An officer shouted as I ran toward the driveway. "I live here." I yelled back, "That's my house." Officer Miller, the man I had spoken to on the phone, stepped out from the garage. He recognized me. He held up a hand to the other officers. "Mrs. Reynolds," he said, walking to meet me halfway up the driveway. "Take a breath." I looked past him. The front door of my house wasn't just open. It was hanging off its hinges. The big bay window in the living room was shattered, shards of glass glinting on the front lawn like jagged diamonds. What happened? I choked out. Did they come? The loan sharks. Officer Miller shook his head slowly. No, ma'am. We didn't find any gang members. We found your husband. I froze. Mark. He's in the back of the squad car, Miller said, jerking his thumb toward the cruiser nearest the curb. He's under arrest for domestic disturbance and destruction of property. He did this. I whispered. Neighbors called 911 because of the noise, Miller explained. They said he was screaming, throwing things. It looks like he was looking for something. I felt a cold realization wash over me. I walked past the officer, stepping over the glass, and entered my home. It looked like a tornado had touched down in the living room. The sofa cushions were slashed open, stuffing spilling out like guts. The TV was smashed. The bookshelves were toppled, books spine up on the floor. He hadn't just trashed the place. He had hunted through it. He was looking for money. He was looking for jewelry. He was looking for anything he could pawn or sell to make that noon deadline. I walked down the hall to the guest room. I looked at the air vent near the floor. The grate was unscrewed and thrown across the room. He had found the diamond earrings. My stomach twisted. He had torn apart our sanctuary to feed the beast one last time. I walked back outside. The air felt colder now. I walked straight to the police car where Mark was sitting. The window was rolled down a crack. He looked terrible. His shirt was torn. He had a cut on his forehead that was bleeding sluggishly, but it was his eyes that haunted me. They were wild, dilated, frantic. When he saw me, he didn't look ashamed. He looked angry. You did this, he screamed, lunging at the window. He hit the glass with his handcuffs. You hid them. You hid the earrings. I knew you had them. I stood there, surrounded by my neighbors, watching the man I had loved for 12 years scream at me through a reinforced window. They were my grandmother's, Mark, I said softly. The glass muffled my voice, but he heard me. I needed them, he spat. They're going to kill me, Lisa. Do you get that? You signed my death warrant. No, I said, feeling a strange, sad calm settle over me. You did, when you picked up that first card, when you placed that first bet. I did it for us, he yelled, the lie still clinging to his lips even now. I was trying to win it back. One big hit, Lisa. One big hit, and I would have put it all back. We would have had the big house, the boat, everything. I looked at Mrs. Higgins across the street. She looked away, embarrassed for me. We had everything, I said to Mark. We had a home. We had safety. We had each other. And you bet it all on black. Officer Miller stepped up beside me. We're taking him in for booking, ma'am. We'll need you to come down tomorrow to finalize the charges regarding the fraud. I'll be there, I said. I watched as the police car pulled away. Mark was still shouting, his face pressed against the glass, growing smaller and smaller until the car turned the corner and vanished. The sirens faded. The blue lights turned off. Suddenly, it was just a quiet suburban street again. Except my window was broken, my door was off its hinges, and my life was in pieces on the lawn. Sarah came up behind me and wrapped her arms around my shoulders. Come on, she said. Let's get your things. You can't stay here. We went inside. I packed a suitcase, stepping over the debris of my marriage. I found my wedding photo on the floor, the frame cracked right down the middle, separating Mark and me. I left it there. As we were walking out, my phone buzzed. I flinched. I pulled it out, expecting the worst. It was an email notification from the bank. Subject: fraud investigation opened. Dear Mrs. Reynolds, based on your affidavit and the police report filed today, we have temporarily frozen all debts associated with the identity theft claims. An investigator has been assigned to your case. It wasn't a solution. It wasn't a check for $40,000, but it was a start. It was the first brick in the wall I would have to build to protect myself. I locked the front door as best I could, using a piece of plywood Sarah found in the garage to cover the hole. I got into Sarah's car. As we drove away, I didn't look back at the house. I couldn't. What now? Sarah asked quietly. I looked at my hands. They were bare. I had taken off my wedding ring somewhere between the bank and the police station. I didn't even remember doing it. Now, I said, I file for divorce. And I sue him for every cent he owes me. But as I closed my eyes, I knew it wasn't that simple. The money was gone. The house was likely underwater. Mark was going to prison, which meant he couldn't pay me back even if the court ordered him to. I was 38 years old. I was single. I was broke. And I was homeless. The anger was starting to fade, and in its place, a deep, hollow exhaustion was setting in. I thought the worst was over. Mark was in jail. The secret was out. But I was wrong. The fallout of a financial nuclear bomb doesn't end when the explosion stops. It's the radiation that gets you. And the radiation was just beginning. The gossip in a small town moves faster than the speed of light. By the time I walked into my office 3 days later, everyone knew. I could feel it in the way the receptionist looked down at her keyboard when I passed. I could hear it in the sudden silence that fell over the break room when I entered to get water. They weren't whispering about a divorce. They were whispering about the police cars, the shattered window, and the man in handcuffs. Did you hear? Mark Reynolds was stealing from his own wife. Gambling, they say. Millions. And she didn't know? How could she not know? That was the hardest part. The judgment. People assume that if you live with a monster, you must have seen the claws. They don't understand that monsters are excellent at wearing human skin. I kept my head high. I did my work. But inside I was crumbling. The real confrontation, however, wasn't with my coworkers. It was with Mark's parents. Linda and Bob were good people. They were churchgoers. They hosted the annual 4th of July barbecue. They loved Mark blindly, with that fierce, protective parental love that refuses to see flaws. They called me 2 days after the arrest. Lisa, Linda's voice was trembling on the phone. We're coming over. We need to talk about fixing this misunderstanding. Misunderstanding. I was staying at Sarah's house. I told them to come there. When they arrived, they looked 10 years older. Bob's shoulders were slumped. Linda's eyes were swollen. They sat on Sarah's floral couch, clutching their knees. We visited Mark, Linda started, her voice tight. He looks terrible, Lisa. He's in a cage. He put himself there, Linda, I said gently. He says it's all a mistake. Bob interrupted, his voice booming slightly, trying to regain some control. He says he had a liquidity problem. He says if you just drop the charges and let him refinance the house, he can pay everyone back. He says you overreacted. I looked at them. They were desperate to believe him. They wanted their son back. They wanted the accountant, the success story, the good boy. He lied to you, I said. Mark wouldn't steal, Linda insisted, tears spilling over. He manages money for a living. He's responsible. I didn't argue. Arguments are useless against denial. I reached for the manila folder I had placed on the coffee table. I didn't want you to see this, I said, but you need to know who he really is. I opened the folder. I laid out the photos of the second phone, the screenshots of the gambling sites, the credit card statements in my name with thousands of dollars in cash advances, and finally, the copy of the forged signature card from the bank. Look at the dates, I said, pointing to a withdrawal. This was Christmas Eve. Remember? He said he was going to buy last-minute gifts. He withdrew $5,000 from our retirement fund and lost it on a virtual poker game in 20 minutes. Linda picked up the paper. Her hands were shaking so hard the paper rattled. And this, I pointed to the text message from the loan shark. This is why the police were there. He owed dangerous people money. He was going to mortgage our home, my home, to pay them off. Bob stared at the text message. He read it once, then twice. The color drained from his face. He told us he needed money for an investment, Bob whispered. He asked us for $10,000 last week. We gave it to him. I closed my eyes. He lost that too, Bob. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the sound of an image shattering. The image of their son. Linda let out a low, keen wail. She covered her face with her hands. Bob just stared at the floor, defeated. They didn't ask me to drop the charges again. They didn't ask me to bail him out. They stood up, looking fragile and broken. I'm sorry, Lisa, Bob said, his voice cracking. We didn't know. We raised him better than this. I know, I said, and I meant it. The consequences for Mark came swiftly after that. Because he was a certified accountant, the rest wasn't just a personal failing. It was a professional death sentence. The news hit the local paper. Local CPA charged with fraud and identity theft. His firm fired him immediately. The state board launched an investigation to revoke his license. His reputation, the currency he traded in, was worthless. I went to the preliminary hearing a week later. I didn't have to go, but I needed to see it. I needed to see the justice system acknowledge what had happened to me. Mark was brought in wearing an orange jumpsuit. He looked small. Without his suit, without his expensive watch, without his confident smile, he looked like a child playing dress up. He scanned the room. His eyes locked on mine. I expected anger. I expected him to scream again, but he just looked tired. He looked at me, and then he looked down at his shackled hands. He knew that the parents, the wife, the job, the house, it was all gone. His lawyer tried to argue for bail, but the judge wasn't having it. The threat of the loan sharks and the massive amount of theft made him a flight risk. Bail is denied, the judge said, banging the gavel. As I led him away, Mark didn't look back. I walked out of the courthouse alone. The air outside was crisp and cold. I ran into a colleague of Mark's, a man named Greg, on the courthouse steps. He had been at our wedding. Lisa, he said, looking uncomfortable. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. We had no idea. Thank you, Greg, I said. If there's anything you need. I need a job, I said. A second one. I have a lot of debt to pay off. He nodded, looking at his shoes. You're a strong woman, Lisa. Most people would have crumbled. I did crumble, I told him. I'm just rebuilding now. I walked to my car. I didn't feel triumphant. Seeing Mark in handcuffs didn't put the money back in my account. It didn't fix my credit score. It didn't give me back the last 2 years of my life. But it gave me something else. It gave me the truth. Everyone knew now. I wasn't the crazy wife. I wasn't the failure. I was the victim of a crime, and I had survived it. I drove back to Sarah's house. I had a meeting with a bankruptcy lawyer the next day. I had to sell the house, or what was left of it, to pay off the secured loans. I was going to lose the garden I loved. I was going to lose the kitchen we cooked in. But as I drove, I noticed something. The sky was a brilliant, piercing blue. The leaves on the trees were turning gold and red. The world was still beautiful. I turned on the radio. I rolled down the window. For the first time in 2 years, I wasn't wondering what Mark was doing. I wasn't wondering why the bank balance looked weird. I wasn't wondering where he was. I was alone. I was broke, but I was free. It took 6 months to sell the house. I remember the day I handed the keys to the real estate agent. The house was empty. The walls were bare, leaving behind those ghostly pale squares where pictures used to hang. The broken window had been replaced, the door fixed, but the scar of what happened there remained in the air. I walked through the rooms one last time. I stood in the kitchen where Mark had tried to convince me to refinance. I stood in the garage where I had found the phone. I didn't cry. I had cried enough. I just felt a quiet, heavy sense of closure. The sale of the house covered the mortgage, and the majority of the personal loans Mark had taken out in my name. The rest, the credit card debt, the overdraft fees, I had to handle through a repayment plan. I didn't file for bankruptcy. I wanted to pay it. I know that sounds stubborn, maybe even foolish to some, but I needed to know that I cleaned up the mess. I needed to reclaim my name, dollar by dollar. I moved into a small one-bedroom apartment in the city. It was a third-floor walk-up. It had creaky floors and a radiator that clanked in the middle of the night. It was a far cry from the suburban dream home we had planned to buy, but it was mine. Every object in that apartment was honest. The couch was secondhand, but I paid cash for it. The TV was small, but I owned it. There were no hidden cameras, no secret phones, no lies tucked into the drawers. The first night I spent there, I ordered a pizza and sat on the floor. It was raining outside. I listened to the rain and realized for the first time in years my stomach didn't hurt. The anxiety that had been a low-level hum in my background, the intuition screaming that something was wrong, was gone. Mark pleaded guilty. He didn't have much of a choice. The evidence was overwhelming. He took a plea deal to avoid a longer trial. He was sentenced to 4 years in state prison for grand larceny and identity theft, followed by 5 years of probation. I didn't go to the sentencing. I didn't need to see him in an orange jumpsuit again. I had already said goodbye to the man I thought he was. The man in the cell was a stranger. I did receive a letter from him about 3 months into his sentence. It came in a plain, white envelope with a prison stamp on it. I sat at my small kitchen table and stared at it for a long time. Part of me wanted to burn it. Part of me wanted to tear it up. But curiosity is a powerful thing. I opened it. It was 2 pages of handwriting. He apologized. He said the addiction had taken over his brain. He said he loved me. He said he was going to get help. I read it once. Then I folded it up and put it in the recycling bin. His addiction was an explanation, but it wasn't an excuse. He had chosen to lie. He had chosen to steal. He had chosen to protect himself at my expense. I didn't write back. My silence was my final answer. Recovering financially is math. You budget, you save, you work extra shifts. I took freelance design jobs on the weekends. I watched my credit score slowly, painfully tick back up. 550, 600, 650. Recovering emotionally. That is art. And it is messy. For a long time, I didn't trust anyone. If a friend borrowed $5 for coffee, I watched them like a hawk until they paid it back. If a date offered to pay for dinner, I insisted on splitting the bill. I was terrified of owing anyone anything or anyone owing me. I felt stupid. That was the hardest shame to shake. I was an educated woman. How did I not see it? How did I let him handle the money for so long without checking? It took therapy to realize that trust isn't a weakness. Trust is a gift. Mark abused that gift. That was his failure, not mine. One afternoon, about a year after the arrest, I was at the grocery store. I was in the checkout line and the woman in front of me was arguing with her husband about the price of organic milk. "It's too expensive, John," she was saying. "It's fine, we can afford it," he grumbled, tossing it in the cart. I saw her look at him with that mix of annoyance and trust. She didn't check the bank balance on her phone. She just believed him. I felt a pang of jealousy. I missed that innocence. But then I paid for my own groceries. I used my debit card. I knew exactly to the penny how much was in my account. I knew that the milk I bought was paid for. I knew that the car I drove home was insured. I walked out to my car and I breathed in the cool air. I wasn't rich. I wasn't married. My retirement fund was starting from zero, but I was safe. I had walked through the fire and I hadn't burned up. I had come out the other side, a little scarred, a little tougher, but standing on my own 2 feet. I learned that financial independence isn't just about money. It's about freedom. It's about knowing that no matter who walks out of your life, you can still keep the lights on. I drove home to my squeaky apartment. I made a cup of tea. I sat by the window and watched the sun set over the city skyline. I was alone, but for the first time in my life, being alone didn't feel lonely. It felt like peace. is often said that love is blind. But in my case, love wasn't blind. It was just looking in the wrong direction. I was looking at the smiling face of my husband while his hands were busy dismantling our life behind my back. We are taught that marriage is about partnership. It's about what's mine is yours. But Lisa's story is a painful reminder that trust should never mean closing your eyes. Financial infidelity is just as devastating as a physical affair. It robs you of your security, your future, and your peace of mind. Lisa lost her inheritance. She lost her home. She lost the decade she invested in Mark. But she gained something that money cannot buy, the absolute certainty that she can survive on her own. She learned that walking away with $0 is better than staying with a million lies. Sometimes the hardest thing to do is to look at the person you love and admit that they are not who you thought they were. It takes immense courage to pull that thread, to check that phone, to walk into that bank, and to face the ruin. But as Lisa found out, the ruin isn't the end. It's the foundation for a new life, one built on truth, however modest it may be. I want to ask you a question today, and I want you to be honest with yourself in the comments. If you found a secret phone in your partner's car, knowing that opening it might destroy your family and everything you've built, would you have the courage to look? Or would you put it back in the glove box and choose not to know? Let me know your thoughts down below. And if Lisa's strength inspired you, or if you've ever had to rebuild from nothing, please share your story. You never know who needs to hear it. If this story touched you, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. We share these stories not just to entertain, but to remind you that no matter how dark it gets, you are never truly alone. Until next time, take care of yourselves and trust your intuition. It's usually right,